The mountains were the kind of quiet that makes you afraid to speak. Each step my son and I took sank deep into the snow, the sound muffled, swallowed. The wind cut sharp along the ridge, turning our breath into white ghosts that trailed behind us. Our boots were soaked, our stomachs empty. We had been walking for 2 days without seeing another human, just trees heavy with snow, and the endless sound of our own breathing. "Dad," Ethan whispered, "how much farther?" His voice trembled, not from fear but from exhaustion. "Until we find warmth," I said. "Just warmth." We had left the town days ago, chasing a rumor, a cabin deep in the woods where people once stayed during logging season. It might still stand, an old trucker had said. If you're lucky. Luck hadn't been ours for a while. The night before, we'd slept in the shell of an old ranger shed. The wind came through the walls like it owned the place, and the cold bit through our coats. I'd almost given up on the cabin story altogether. But then, that morning, the air changed. It smelled faintly of wood smoke. Not old smoke, fresh. Alive. Ethan smelled it too. "Dad," he said, tugging my sleeve. "Fire." His eyes lit up the way mine used to when I was his age. We followed the scent uphill, boots crunching through snow that grew deeper with every step. The trail narrowed between 2 pines, then opened suddenly into a small clearing. That's when we saw it, a cabin. Small, wooden, leaning slightly, but unmistakably real. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin and steady against the gray sky. I stopped, hardly breathing. "Do you see that?" I asked. Ethan just nodded, his mouth open, eyes wide as wonder. From where we stood, it looked like something out of another life. A place where people cooked dinners, argued softly, left muddy boots by the door. The windows glowed faintly, but the snow around the cabin was untouched. No footprints, no sled marks. Just the smooth white of a world that hadn't been disturbed in days. "Maybe someone's inside," Ethan whispered. "Maybe," I said, though part of me already doubted it. The smoke said warmth, but the silence said waiting. Either way, we were too cold to turn back. "Stay close," I told him. "If someone's there, we'll ask to rest." The door was half buried under snow. I cleared it with my gloves, knocking once, then again, louder. "Hello?" I called. The only answer was the wind brushing against the eaves. "Anyone home?" Nothing. My fingers hesitated on the handle. It turned easily. The door creaked open and released a breath of air that smelled like pine, smoke, and something almost forgotten comfort. Inside, a fire burned low in the stone hearth. A kettle hung above it, steam curling from the spout. A loaf of bread sat on the table, still warm enough to scent the room. My heart stumbled in my chest. Ethan stepped in behind me, rubbing his hands together. "Dad, this is perfect." It was more than perfect. It was impossible. The cabin was small but clean, one bed, a sturdy table, a few shelves lined with jars of beans, flour, salt. On the counter sat 2 bowls, 2 spoons, like someone had known exactly how many we'd be. My stomach ached just from looking at it. But something inside me hesitated. "Hello?" I called again, softer this time. No one answered. Only the crackle of the fire replied, steady and alive. I walked closer to the table. A folded piece of paper rested beside the bread. My fingers shook as I opened it. The handwriting was careful. The ink faded but clear enough to read. "If you found this place, you need it more than I do. Everything here is for you. Use it well. Stay warm. A friend, that was all. No name, no date, just those words, simple and human. I read them twice before showing Ethan. He frowned. Who's the friend? I didn't know how to answer, but somehow I felt like we'd already met him. We waited for nearly an hour, expecting someone to return. No one came. The snow outside deepened, covering our footprints completely. "Dad?" Ethan said softly. "Can we stay?" I looked around. Everything in the cabin felt prepared. Not abandoned, prepared. The wood piles stacked neatly, the bed made tight, the lanterns filled with oil. "Yes," I said finally. "We'll stay, just until morning." He smiled with relief, the kind only a child can have after weeks of cold nights. I tore a piece of the bread. It was soft, fresh, almost sweet. "Thank you, whoever you are," I whispered. That night, we ate slowly. We spoke little. The wind howled outside, but the walls held strong. Ethan fell asleep by the fire, the glow painting his face gold and peaceful. I sat watching him, the flames dancing in his reflection. The note lay folded in my pocket, as if carrying someone's invisible promise. For the first time in months, my hands stopped shaking. For the first time in months, I didn't dream of running. Just warmth, just breathing, just stillness. It felt like the world had finally let us rest. Morning light spilled through the frost-covered window. Snow had piled halfway up the door overnight. Outside, everything was white and silent. Even the wind hushed as if respecting the peace of the place. I stepped out carefully, boots sinking deep. There were no fresh tracks around the cabin, just ours from yesterday, now filled in. I walked around back and found a shed half buried under snow. Inside, more wood, an axe, a shovel, and a few canned goods, sealed tight. Whoever the friend was, they hadn't just built shelter. They'd built foresight. Ethan found an old sled behind the cabin that afternoon. He spent hours sliding down the hill, his laughter echoing through the valley like something sacred. I mended our boots with string from a drawer, patching holes while watching snow drift past the window. The world outside looked frozen in time. Inside, it was like stepping into the last heartbeat of kindness left behind. That night, I found another note tucked into a book on the shelf. It read, "There's still goodness out here. Don't let the cold convince you otherwise." It was signed the same way, a friend. We stayed longer than planned. The storm didn't let up for 3 days. Each morning, I fed the fire, melted snow for water, and cooked what we had. Ethan drew shapes in the frost on the window, his laughter filling the cabin. For once, silence didn't mean loneliness. It meant safety. I started talking to the cabin like it could hear me. "You've been good to us," I'd say, feeding another log to the fire. And somehow, I swear it creaked a reply, like wood shifting in gratitude. Some places don't need voices to say welcome. You just feel it. On the 4th day, I decided to explore. Behind the cabin, through waist-high snow, I found a wooden cross. It leaned slightly, the wood gray and soft from years of weather. I brushed off the snow, tracing the carving at its center. It said, "For those who wander." No name, no date, just those words. I stood there a long time, the wind sharp against my face. Whoever built this place, whoever left that note, had known what it meant to wander, to be forgotten, to need mercy more than anything. Maybe that's why they built it to remember. That night, the fire burned higher than before. I sat beside it, turning the note in my hands. I thought about the person who wrote it, and the hundreds of others who might never find this place. How many people freeze just a few miles away? never knowing that warmth is so close. It broke something inside me. We take warmth for granted when we have it, but when we lose it, even a single spark feels like grace. This cabin wasn't a coincidence. It was proof that someone somewhere had refused to let the cold win. Ethan must have felt it too. "Dad," he said, "what if we leave something here like they did? So it's ready for the next people?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, we'll do that." We went through our things, what little we had. 1 can of soup, a spare pair of socks, half a bar of soap. Not much, but it was something. We placed it neatly on the table. Ethan took a piece of paper from my pack and began to write. His handwriting was crooked, but the words were strong. "Thank you, friend. We'll keep your fire alive." When he was done, we added another line. "For whoever comes next, don't give up. There's still warmth left in this world. You just have to find it." We folded it carefully and left it where the first note had been. The circle was complete. That night, I sat by the fire, watching Ethan sleep, and realized something I hadn't dared believe in a long time. We were safe. Not because the storm had passed, but because kindness had found us before it did. The storm broke on the 6th day. The air turned crisp and blue, sunlight bouncing off every frozen branch. We packed our things, leaving behind more than we'd arrived with, not in weight, but in meaning. Before leaving, I checked the fire. It was steady, glowing softly. "Should we put it out?" Ethan asked. I shook my head. "No, someone else might need it," he smiled. "Then it'll never go out." And maybe, in some way, he was right. Because kindness, once lit, doesn't die. It just waits. We stepped outside. The snow crunched beneath our feet, the mountain air clean and endless. From the ridge, I looked back. The chimney still smoked faintly, thin against the sky. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I felt part of something larger, an invisible chain of compassion stretching across time and frost. We didn't just survive. We'd become keepers of a promise we didn't even know existed. That night, camping near a frozen stream, Ethan asked, "Dad, do you think the friend is still out there somewhere?" I poked at the fire, thinking. "Maybe not," I said. "But their kindness is." He nodded, eyes heavy with sleep. "Then maybe we can be friends for someone else," he murmured. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's the idea." And as he drifted off, I looked up at the stars and thought, maybe that's how the world stays warm, one stranger at a time. If you ever find yourself lost in the mountains, cold and tired, and you see smoke curling from a chimney where no tracks lead, don't be afraid. It might just be waiting for you, the way it waited for us. Inside, you'll find a note, maybe even 2. One old, one new, and a fire that never stopped burning. When you do, feed it, rest, and leave something behind for the next soul who wanders too far. Because that's how kindness survives winter hand to hand, hearth to hearth, until the world remembers to be warm again. A whole year passed before Ethan and I saw those mountains again. Life had changed in quiet, humble ways. We were renting a small trailer by a river now. I'd found work fixing fences and patching barns for a nearby farm. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Ethan was back in school. He laughed again. Yet on cold nights, when the wind howled outside, I'd see him watching the snow and know exactly what he was thinking about the cabin. The one with the fire, the bread, and the note that saved our lives. "Dad," he asked one night, "do you think it's still there?" "Maybe," I said. "Places like that don't just vanish, they wait." He smiled the way he used to before we lost everything quietly. like hope was something you could hold again. So when December came, and the air turned white with frost, we packed our things. Not much, 2 thermoses of coffee, some food, and a promise to visit the place that had given us back our faith in people. We told no one where we were going. It felt like a pilgrimage, a journey back to a moment that had changed everything without asking for anything in return. The snow was deep by the time we reached the ridge. The trees bent under its weight, their branches cracking softly in the wind. Our boots sank with every step. It took us half a day to reach the place where we first smelled the smoke a year ago. We stopped there, breathing hard, looking at the same trail that had once led us to warmth. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "Do you think anyone else ever found it?" "I hope so," I said. Then, through the trees, I saw it again. Thin, gray, smoke curling up into the pale winter sky. "There!" Ethan shouted, pointing. And sure enough, the cabin still stood, solid and familiar, the smoke rising exactly as it had that first night. My heart pounded. We hurried down the path, but halfway across the clearing, I stopped. Footprints, small ones, big ones, dozens of them, pressed deep into the snow. A wooden sled leaned against the porch, and near the door, a pile of chopped wood stacked neatly. "Someone's living here," I said quietly. Ethan grinned. "Then we have to meet them." We exchanged a look, half excitement, half wonder, and walked toward the same door that once saved us. I knocked gently. The door opened a few moments later, and a woman appeared. Her hair was tucked under a wool cap, her cheeks pink from the cold. She looked surprised to see strangers, but not afraid. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Sorry to intrude," I said, lowering my hood. "We stayed here last winter during the storm." Her eyes softened. "You're them," she whispered. "You're the ones who left a note." Before I could reply, she stepped aside. "Please come in. You should see what this place has become." The warmth hit us immediately. The smell of wood smoke and stew wrapped around me like an old memory. Inside, a man sat by the fire mending a coat, and 2 children played quietly near the hearth. The woman smiled. "We found your note," she said, pointing to the wall. It was still there, pinned above the table. Our handwriting had faded a little, but the words were clear. She continued softly. "We were stranded up here last winter. Car broke down on the back road. We would have frozen, but then we saw the smoke. You saved our lives." I felt my throat tighten. "No," I said quietly. "Someone else saved ours first." The man stood, shaking my hand firmly. "We're the Harrisons," he said. "This place, your kindness, it gave us more than warmth. It gave us a reason to believe again." He nodded toward the shelves along the wall. They were full now, jars of beans, dried fruit, canned soup, candles, even blankets folded neatly. "We decided to keep it going," he said. "Whenever we can, we restock it. Others have come through, too. Hikers, a couple with a dog, an old man once. They all leave something behind." I turned slowly, taking it all in. The cabin was alive, breathing generosity. Ethan walked to the window. "You kept the fire going all year?" The woman smiled. "We take turns. If we leave, we always make sure the next person has wood, food, and a note." Craze. She handed me a box filled with old papers. "We found these under the floorboards. Letters, all signed the same way. Inside were folded pages, yellowed from age." I opened one carefully. The ink was faded, but the words were there. "If you found this, you've come far enough to know that kindness still exists. Rest, eat, leave the fire ready for the next traveler. A friend. I stared at it for a long time. The handwriting was different from the note I'd found, but the message was the same. The same voice, echoing across years, maybe decades. "This place," I murmured, "has been helping people longer than we've been alive." The woman nodded. "It's like the mountain's secret, passed hand to hand." Ethan was holding another letter now, reading aloud quietly. "Kindness doesn't end, it just changes hands." He looked up at me, eyes shining. "Dad, we're part of it now." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. That evening, we ate together, stew, bread, hot tea. The children giggled while Ethan told them about the first time we came here, how he found the sled and drew on the frosted window. The man laughed. "We found that sled. It's still the best one for the hill out back." I smiled, my chest aching in the best way. The cabin walls glowed with firelight. I realized that this place didn't just hold people, it held their echoes. Every laugh, every meal, every word of gratitude layered into its wooden bones, until the place itself became human. After dinner, we added our own mark. Ethan pulled from his bag a small carving he'd made, a wooden hand holding a tiny flame. "For the next friend," he said. The woman placed it on the mantel. "That's perfect." She turned to me. "You know, before you came, we used to wonder if people like you really existed. People who still cared without knowing who they were helping. You made us believe again." Her voice trembled. I looked at the note on the wall and said softly, "We didn't start it. We just refused to end it." That night, the snow fell hard again. We all slept on the floor by the fire, like family. I woke up once to add wood to the flames. The cabin creaked softly in the wind, but the warmth never wavered. I glanced at the letters on the table. There were at least 20 now, different handwriting, same message. It struck me that maybe the cabin wasn't just a shelter. It was a conversation carried across generations, one where the words never changed, only the handwriting. A language made of care, passed down like a secret recipe for hope. Morning brought blue skies and sunlight so bright it hurt to look at. The world outside sparkled like it was made of glass. Over breakfast, the man said, "We plan to stay through the winter, then move closer to town in spring. But don't worry, someone always finds it." He pointed to a wooden box by the door. "People leave messages when they pass through. You should read a few." I did. There were notes from all kinds of people, hikers, travelers, a woman who'd lost her way driving home. Each one ended with the same word, thanks. Ethan and I added our own letter to the box. We came back. The fire's still alive. "Keep it burning, friend." He signed both our initials at the bottom, S and E. The man smiled. "You know, someday there'll be more letters here than wood in the walls." "Good," I said. "That's how it should be." When we left later that morning, the Harrisons stood on the porch, waving. The chimney puffed smoke into the blue air. For a moment, I thought I saw the mountain exhale like it, too, was grateful. As we hiked down, the snow crunched softly beneath our boots. The silence felt peaceful this time, not heavy. Ethan walked beside me, kicking at patches of ice. "Dad," he said, "do you think the first friend ever knew how far it would go?" I thought about the old letters, the careful handwriting, the fire that never went out. "I don't think they cared about how far," I said, "only that it kept going." He nodded. "Then maybe that's the point. You don't measure kindness. You just pass it on." Sometimes, my kid sounds older than I'll ever be. Back in town, we stopped at a small diner for coffee. The waitress asked where we'd come from. "From a cabin up in the mountains," I said. Her eyes lit up. You mean the one with the notes? My brother stayed there last year. Ethan and I froze. She smiled. He said it was like stepping into a miracle. I laughed softly. Yeah, that sounds about right. And in that moment, I realized the story had already traveled farther than the trail. The cabin wasn't just a place anymore. It was a rumor of goodness, spreading quietly through the world. Weeks later, a letter arrived at our trailer. No return address, no name. Inside was a photograph, the cabin glowing at dusk, our note framed above the hearth. On the back, written in neat handwriting, the fire's still burning. Thank you for keeping it alive. Your friends. I held it for a long time, the paper warm from my hands. It felt like holding proof that kindness doesn't disappear. It migrates, like birds following the seasons, always returning where it's needed most. We didn't go back that next winter, or the one after that. But sometimes, when the air smelled of smoke and pine, Ethan would glance at me and say, You think someone's there right now? And I'd nod. I know they are, because by then, it wasn't just faith, it was certainty. You can't stop a fire like that. It doesn't belong to anyone anymore. It belongs to everyone who ever needed it, and everyone who ever will. One spring, Ethan built a birdhouse in our yard. He carved a small message on the side. For those who wander, when I saw it, I smiled. You remember? Of course, he said. It's our family motto now. He hung it on a tall pine near the fence. Birds found it within days. Watching them, I thought maybe that's what we do in this world. Build little shelters wherever we can, for whoever might need them next. If you ever find yourself lost in the cold, and through the trees you see a thin line of smoke where no road leads, follow it. Inside, you'll find warmth waiting, a letter on the table, and a fire that's older than any of us. When you leave, add your own note. You don't need to sign your name. Just write, a friend. That's enough. Because that's how the world stays warm, not through miracles, but through strangers who refuse to let the fire die. And maybe, just maybe, the cabin will be waiting for you too. Years have a way of smoothing out the edges of memory, but they sharpen the good parts. I still remember the first winter we survived because a stranger left a note and a fire. But what I think about now is what came after. Ethan finished school, started fixing things that didn't belong to us. Porches, fences, a ramp for the library, like he was paying off a debt no one asked him to carry. He kept a scrap of paper pinned above his desk. For those who wander, sometimes I'd catch him staring at it. One day, he'd say, We'll build our own warmth. We visited the mountain when we could. Some winters we stayed only an hour, leaving tea, matches, and a new letter in the wooden box. Some winters we stayed the night and listened to new voices tell an old story. How the fire was already lit, how the bread tasted like luck. The cabin kept saving people. It needed nothing from us except what kindness always asks, continuity. Every time we left, Ethan ran his palm along the doorframe, like he was memorizing the grain. It doesn't belong to anyone, he'd whisper, but it belongs to everyone. I learned to agree. The year Ethan turned 24, a storm hit town, hard eyes snapped lines, roofs caved, roads locked shut. The diner opened as a shelter, then the church, then the school gym. On the third night, Ethan said, We need something that stays ready all the time. Not just in town, out where help takes too long. I knew the place in his head before he said it. A second cabin, I answered. He nodded. Not to replace the first, just to widen the circle. He pulled a notebook from his coat and drew by lantern light. Doors, bunks, a stove, a box for letters. We didn't have money. We had neighbors. The carpenter who once brought us leftover boards said yes before we finished asking. The plumber donated stove, pipe, and stubborn optimism. High schoolers hauled scavenged windows. A retired ranger pointed us to a ridge that held wind without breaking. Carol's granddaughter delivered bread to the worksite, laughing that we were baking a shelter one loaf at a time. Someone asked what we planned to name it. Ethan shrugged. No name, he said. Names put limits on things. Then he tacked a hand-painted sign inside the door. A friend was here. B12. We started in late autumn, when the ground still remembered warmth. The frame rose fast, 4 walls of borrowed lumber and believed-in effort. My hands shook more than they used to, so I measured twice and cut slow. Ethan moved with the easy patience of someone who had rebuilt his life piece by piece. He set the door a little wider than usual. Someday a stretcher might need to pass, he said. I didn't ask where he learned to think like that. The mountain wind tested our work each afternoon and signed off each dusk. By first snow, the roof held. Inside, it was simple, because simple stays useful. 6 bunks built low, a table that didn't wobble, a shelf for jars, hooks for coats. We anchored a tiny stove to a slate we dragged up the trail on a borrowed sled. The first time Ethan lit it, the smoke rose clean, obedient. I cried a little and lied about the wind. He pretended not to notice, busy adjusting the damper like a conductor finding tempo. We left 2 blankets, thick as promises, and a stack of dry wood, pyramid neat. Then we stepped outside and listened to our new silence warming. The first letter we wrote together sat crooked on the table, held by a smooth river stone. If you found this, the cold found you first. Eat, rest, dry your socks, add what you can for the next friend. If you can't, your breathing is enough for now. We signed nothing and everything. A friend. Ethan cut a small slot in the wall near the door and slid in a tin for notes. A box for gratitude, he said, and for directions. He drew a map to the spring, another to a safer way down. The cabin wasn't only warmth. It was guidance. Snow closed the road 2 weeks after we finished. We hiked up anyway, carrying a pack heavy with Small Mercy's tea, bandages, a jar of matches, a coil of cord, oranges bright as second chances. The door stuck against new drifts, then gave with a sigh. Inside, footprints, melted circles where boots had lived, a damp scarf draped to dry. On the table, a note in shaky pencil. Found at dusk with my boy. We didn't know we needed your help until we already had it. Left soup, fixed the latch. A friend. My palm found the doorframe. Ethan exhaled like prayer. The Rangers spread the word without making it a story. That's how decent secrets travel quietly, between people who respect them. Hikers started packing an extra can just in case. The trail runners slipped in energy bars like stealth generosity. A quilting group left a rolled blanket with stitches shaped like fir trees. The new cabin began to carry the same music as the old. The rhythm of arrivals and recoveries, the hush of exhausted gratitude, the soft scratch of pencils carving thank you into paper that didn't deserve such love and got it anyway. All winter, the stove learned names. Spring found us on the porch, sending splinters from the rail. You ever think about why the first cabin works? Ethan asked. It's just wood and heat. Plenty of that in the world. I shrugged. Because someone expected us, I said. He nodded slowly. Expectation is powerful. He tapped the sign inside our door. B12. It doesn't accuse, he said. It invites. We added a second sign near the shelf. Take what you need. Leave what you can. Trust that it matters. Rules without punishment, only the gravity of decency. People obeyed like it was their own idea. Not every visit was tidy. A midsummer storm buried the trail under broken limbs. We lifted and dragged, sweat stinging our eyes. Once we found the stove door off its hinge and a scorch mark creeping along the slate. Ethan knelt, patient, repaired the hinge, then posted a note above the damper. Half open is enough, like most hearts. I laughed harder than I should have, but it stuck. Another time, a hunter left a sack of jerky and a map with red X's where cell service sometimes woke. The tin in the wall filled with careful gratitude and crooked maps. The original cabin never stopped breathing either. Sometimes we visited both in a single day, carrying the distance between them like lantern light. The old letters kept multiplying different scripts, same voice. Once we found a photograph propped against the hearth. A young couple with wind-chapped smiles and a baby swaddled in a flannel shirt. On the back, born after the storm, named Ember. Ethan read it twice and set it gently on the mantel beside his wooden hand with the flame. Proof, he said, eyes wet. Warmth is hereditary. I believed him because the room did, too. The year my knees began arguing with stairs, Ethan took on most of the uphill work without making a spectacle of it. He'd load the sled, grin, and say, "You take the stories, I'll take the weight." So, I told stories. To school groups who came timid and left aloud. To church ladies who pressed cookies into my pockets like tithes. To a journalist who promised not to geotag anything, which is a kind of sacrament now. I said the same sentence every time. We didn't invent kindness. We just got out of its way. People wrote it down like instruction. We added a water barrel and a gutter, screened to keep the pine needles out. We tucked a small first aid kit into the shelf and wrote, "Please replace what you use," under a smile that wasn't bossy. Someone left a crank radio that sang weather like a practical hymn. Autumn wrapped the ridge in rust and gold. We sealed the door against drafts with a strip of felt and a hope. A thru-hiker scratched a line into the rail. Found this on my worst day and left on my best. That's as perfect a review as any place can earn. One evening near first frost, we climbed with lanterns to avoid the early dark. The new cabin glowed as if it remembered us, which is how memory works when wood holds the record. Inside, a nurse and a teacher shared cocoa from a dented kettle, boots steaming by the stove. "We read about cabins like this somewhere," the teacher said. "Didn't think they were real," the nurse added. "I'm going to start a box like that in our clinic. Take what you need, leave what you can." Ethan smiled. "Good idea," he said. "Warmth travels faster when it's portable." Winter tested everything it could. One storm iced the latch shut. We learned to carry a bottle of de-icer and left it in a small pocket by the door labeled 4 hard days. Another storm took a limb through the roof. The carpenter returned with shingles and a grandson who swung a hammer with new pride. We wrote thank you notes we didn't sign and tucked them into their coat pockets anyway. The stove never quit. Neither did the letters. Sometimes I'd sit by the table and read them aloud to no one. The room felt fuller afterward, and so did I. The spring the first fawn bedded down under the porch, Ethan said, "It's time for you to build something on flat ground." I laughed. "Like what?" He looked at our little rental and then at the town's edge where an empty lot collected wind. "A bench," he said. "2, actually. shade, a shelf for books, a thermos hook. We built them that weekend. People Saturday, people read. Someone started leaving apples, someone else left mittens. It wasn't a cabin, but it was warmth. Turns out you can build shelters without roofs, as long as you convince the weather to behave for a minute. When Ethan married, they took their honeymoon on the ridge 3 nights between the 2 cabins, leaving ridiculous amounts of tea and a note that read, "Love is a shelter you carry." I pretended not to cry and failed. His partner stitched for those who wander into a blanket the color of late sunlight. That winter, a family we'd never met sent a holiday card with a drawing of the cabins and a child's handwriting. "Thank you, friend. My toes are okay now." We taped it to our refrigerator at home. Some art belongs where hunger lives. Age is a patient teacher. I climb slower, read longer, talk more with my hands near stoves. Ethan does the heavy work with a quiet I used to think meant tired and now understand means satisfied. On good days, I hike to the ridge and sit between the 2 roofs we didn't deserve to build. I listen wind in fur, pop of sap in flame, the papery rustle of notes as someone fingers through gratitude. The mountain keeps our secrets kindly. If I never make it up here again, I've already heard the only sermon I ever needed. Leave more warmth than you took. If you find either cabin old or new, don't look for plaques. There aren't any. Look for the hand-lettered signs and the box in the wall. Look for the river stone that holds the first letter you'll read and the 100th you'll add to. Light the stove. Dry your socks. Drink something hot that tastes like stubborn hope. When you're ready, write your own note. Don't sign your name. Sign it the way strangers have signed for decades, a friend. Then close the door softly and carry the heat with you. That's how the world stays warm, one chosen ember at a time.